Hey everyone, so today is going to be the beginning of a series that I'm starting talking about dungeons. Okay, I'm going to make a video on each specific dungeon, and I'm going to be talking about the mechanics behind that dungeon, as well as the heroes that are best suited for that dungeon. Now, this is going to be my take on a video that people have recommended to me in the comments, video suggestions and stuff like that for tier lists, or another one is asking about dungeon teams. The thing is some people are limited to the amount of heroes that they have on their account, whether they're free to play, pay to win, whether they have certain characters or don't. So I'm not a huge fan of tier lists. I really don't like them. And then in regards to just showing dungeon teams, the other thing that I would struggle with is the fact that I have a bunch of characters booked. I have endgame gear. It would be so hard for me to try and create a team that would show success and also replicate what the average player has. Only, 2 months in, 1 month into the game. I don't know how people could relate to a video like that. So what I'm going to do is just talk about the specific dungeons, talk about the mechanics behind it, and then what I feel you need to look for in the characters that you have to best suit your dungeon progression. Okay? I hope everyone can get behind that. Some people may still want to see tier list videos and dungeon team videos and whatnot. And maybe eventually I do that by starting a new account and doing like a free-to-play series and just talk about progression there. But that is going to be a ways down the road. The other thing that I could probably do is just show some of my endgame dungeon teams that I use. But I think a lot of that would be repetitive because I use similar heroes, and there's a lot of really good videos out there already with dungeon teams that currently exist that haven't really changed. So with all of that being said, let's get into the video, okay? So the first dungeon that we're talking about here is Roaring Tulpa, which is 100% regarded as one of the most useless dungeons in the game, and that still holds true. But the reason I want to talk about it is the dungeon that the game sets you up to progress in the furthest with first. The reason I say this is for two reasons. One, whenever new players start out, they actually get a hero in an epic, which is called Hitoshi, which is a very strong epic, and he is wood. So that means even though he is not strong affinity to the Tulpa dungeon, he is also not weak. He also does AoE abilities, so he can help you clear waves to get to the boss. So he's very useful in that regard. The other reason why the game tries to position you towards the Tulpa dungeon is in the hero synthesis section, they give you Bella. And Bella is a Tulpa specialist. She kicks the butt of Tulpa. So I think it is one of the easier dungeons for a brand new player to scale up to and get to higher levels first. So whenever you are scaling in your dungeon progression, whether it is Roaring Tulpa, whether it's Ash Magisteria, Queen or Witch, or Gemini Dragon, you're going to complete these stages as you progress through the game with higher character levels, right? Whether your heroes are level 60 or 50, whether you have a full team of 60s, so on and so forth. And then on top of that, it's also going to depend on how quickly you can level your gear, right? So maybe in floor 10 of dungeons, you'll have heroes that only have, level 12 gear, right? And then maybe for Hell Stage 2, you need, level 15 gear. So all of those things come into effect with your dungeon progression. But to maximize your efficiency in dungeons, the first thing that you truly need to understand is how the dungeon works. Okay? So for Tulpa, if you click on the dungeon up in this magnifying glass here, it takes you to what the mechanics of this boss does. Okay? Now, I'm not going to go over everything that he does because I have a sticky note here, and we're going to go over that. But just for a quick reference, people can go into that magnifying glass and read themselves if they want to skip ahead to different dungeons if Roaring Tulpa does not interest you. So, let's bring up my sticky note here, and we're going to go over the key things that Tulpa does, or key interests of Tulpa that you should worry about whenever you're building a team. And we'll go over the heroes that are best suited for the Tulpa dungeon after I go over this, okay? So, in Tulpa, the main thing that you need to understand are some of these bullet points. 1, he will counterattack. So if he gets hit enough, I believe it's 6 times. I don't know if that is the same way on the lowest levels, but it is relevant for the plateaus that you're trying to reach on your dungeon progression throughout the game. He does counterattack, and I believe this is after 6 times. 6 times of being attacked. So you have to realize that if you attack him enough times, he's going to hit you back. So you're going to be taking more damage than usual because he's going to be taking additional turns, right, with that counterattack. The other thing is he starts with increased defense. This is a unremovable effect. He will always just have an increase in his defense. So you definitely want to keep that in mind when you're bringing in characters, whether it's people that can decrease his defense, so it allows you to do more damage, or you want characters that have defense pierce, which is a buff in the game. It's also important to recognize his defense because he has a skill where the damage scales with his defense. So his static effect will increase the damage of this ability right away. And if you don't have a way to put decreased defense up on Tulpa, there is the potential that this skill can one-shot your heroes. So you do need to be aware of that. Tulpa also has a specific function in his dungeon where, depending on the stage that you're in, he will get something called a fever counter. And if you don't kill him before he gets enough of those stacks on his fever counter, he ends up killing your entire team. So he has a timer. And then the other thing to mention is he has a minion that ends up doing AoE defense down to your entire team. Tulpa himself also has an attack that has AoE defense down. Okay? Hey guys, so sorry to cut into the video here, but quick thing. I just wanted to show the stuff that I was talking about with Tulpa's mechanics. So if you see here, this is his counterattack indicator. He's at 3 right here. Once that gets to 6, he'll counterattack against your team. Here is that static increased defense. So I'm on Hell Stage 2 right now, so its defense is plus 50%. I think in Stage 12 it's plus 30, and I don't know if it scales Hell Stage 4. And here is his Tulpic Fervor. I think I said Fever in the video, but here, once he reaches 4 stacks, this will trigger, and then my whole team will die. So I have to kill him before he gets 4 stacks. It's at 1 right now. So he's at 26%, and I'll have to kill him there. So those are the things I just wanted to show. This Tulpic Fervor is also signified by these stones circling around Tulpa. So, yeah, just wanted to show that real quick. So, whenever you're progressing, you want to keep these things in mind whenever you're building your teams. So if you get up to Stage 12, the key things that you need to watch out for is you need enough damage to kill the waves. If you don't get to Tulpa, you can't beat Tulpa. Some people have really strong single target damage dealers, but they don't have enough AoE damage to get through the wave and end up having one or two of their members die before they get to Tulpa, and then they don't have their full squad to get to Tulpa. That's why this is here, and it's on every single subset of dungeon that I have here as well. Sustain. You need to find ways to stay alive because he's counterattacking against you. He also has AoE defense down on your entire team. So this is something that you need to figure out how to deal with. You need either heals or you need ways to cleanse the AoE defense down in order to mitigate the amount of damage. And then you always, in my opinion, want to bring some kind of defense defense reduction, defense down, or defense pierce in order for you to do enough damage to Tulpa. So if you can't live long enough to kill Tulpa, or stick around long enough, maybe just try and kill him really fast before he kills you, like if you don't have enough sustain. I hope that makes sense. Same exact thing for Health Stage 2, except your damage requirements as well as your HP and defense requirements on your team are going to be higher, or you'll need a better team composition. And then for Health Stage 4, all of those things still apply, but you also have to kill him fast enough. The reason is in these Stage 12 and Stage Hell 2, Tulpa has that timer, right? But it only takes place after he is below 50% damage. On Hell Stage 4, he actually has 3 bars of health. And after the very first bar goes away, this timer starts. So you need to kill him a lot quicker than what you were killing him in Hell Stage 2 and Stage 12. Okay? So those are the key things with Tulpa. Now with him being a wood element dungeon, whenever we're looking in the index, the main things that we're going to be looking for are fire and wood heroes, okay? Water is going to be mostly irrelevant. There are a few exceptions, but that mainly depends on how good your gear is and if certain water heroes are booked and what not. But for this video, we are just going to be looking at wood and fire because you don't need to pay as much attention to this dungeon. So I want you to find specific heroes to beat this dungeon without wasting, books or really valuable resources. So first, let's take a look at elites, and then we'll look at epics and then legendaries. So when you're first starting the game, elite heroes are going to be much easier to get for a lot of people. And I'm sure you're wondering if any of these heroes can scale into the mid or late game. So the first thing I'm going to say is out of all of these heroes, there are 3 in the wood that scale late game currently. Nothing, at this point that I'm making this video, some of these elites may get some kind of rework, or more likely they'll have another dungeon or game mode that comes out that makes their kits relevant. But right now, the main people that can scale into the late game are Raj and Cece. And they are niche picks. They're really circumstantial, so keep that in mind. But for the Tulpa dungeon, I wouldn't say that these 2, and I know I said 3. I was considering Radira, but I changed my mind. There's only 2 in the wood that scale, and that's Raj and Cece. And like I said, they're kind of situational. But I would not recommend building these characters enough just for you to beat the Tulpa dungeon, okay? In regards to fire, there are 3 really nice heroes here that can help you with Tulpa, and they scale okay. 2 more so than the 3rd. So Connor used to be really, really good, but he has been outclassed by a bunch of different heroes. But if you're first starting out, he's probably a nice hero to take to 40 or 50. He gives your team shield and attack up. So this is really good with a couple of the legendary heroes that we're going to talk about. He does pair well with Bella, which I said was a free hero that just kicks Tulpa's butt. So there is some nice synergy there. So not only does he give you sustain and increase the damage that your team is doing, he also gives your entire team a heal. Now, it's pretty long cooldown, which is one of the bummers, but on top of his shield and attack up, this healing is a nice have, and you can probably beat stage 12 with Connor teams, even probably Hell stage 2, but you would have to level Connor up maybe, and I don't think that would be worth it at that point. So Marion actually scales into the later game, and she's good in Guild versus Environment as well. So she's a character that is probably even good to go to 60. She has a really nice aura that gives your team lifesteal as long as she's alive. Okay, that goes away once she dies. So you can build her really tanky, and she has a positive affinity to Tulpa, so you won't have to bring in any kind of healer if you bring in Marion. Also, your team will have to have some decent survivability in order for this lifesteal to keep your team alive if you don't bring in a healer. She also does heals herself, and she has this unique ability that keeps an ally protected for 2 turns where they don't do any kind of damage. So she's really, really nice and scales towards the end game. So if you're looking for a Tulpa-specific hero where your resources won't be wasted, I would say Marion is your best choice. Now, Elson is a really good damage dealer for Tulpa, and he's kind of a solid pick for the Batwolf in the Faction War challenges. So he is another elite that I think is quite good for the Tulpa dungeon. So these two are your best bet, with Connor coming in third, and then these wood heroes kind of as niche picks. But again, if any of these 3 heroes are in your champion pool, these are the ones that I would prioritize for the Tulpa dungeon out of the elites. So moving on to epics. For wood purposes, Antinua is very, very good, and she's one of the best dungeon heroes, especially for Queen of Tides, as well as Witch of the Wind, and even in some cases Gemini Dragon. But the gear requirements for her for Gemini Dragon are quite extensive. In regard to Queen of Tides, her damage is still really necessary to be high, so she'll most likely need booked. With that being said, she might be a byproduct of you completing Tulpa, just because you're going to want to book her for Queen of Tides, which I think is a really nice dungeon for mid-game players. But we'll talk about her in the Queen of Tide dungeon. Vance is a PvP character. Edicris, same thing. Hitoshi, as I mentioned, because it's a character that people are going to get when they start the game, he's a really nice option for that first subcategory that I was saying here, where you need enough damage to kill the waves. If you have a strong enough Hitoshi, he can probably kill some waves for you at the beginning of Tulpa. You do have some heroes in here that can also clear waves, like Zatlux and Baron. But again, these are not really specific Tulpa heroes. Okay, they're kind of just byproducts of other dungeons where you might be able to use them in Tulpa. But this is a Tulpa dungeon specific video, so we're not going to be talking about these heroes specifically because they are not going to be your specialists for Tulpa. So nothing truly here in the wood section, other than maybe Hitoshi, because you start with him and he is an AoE damage dealer. In regards to fire, Zachary is nice as another option, similar to Hitoshi, for killing waves. He has this unique trait that when an enemy is killed, he launches a bonus attack to do an AoE attack. So you can build him really slow and high attack, similar to like a Ciara on the water side. to help deal enough damage to all of the waves. If you have, maybe just one really hard-hitting single target damage dealer, Zachary can come in and clean up the rest. He also does decent damage on Tulpa himself. So once you actually get to Tulpa, he's still a nice option, even though his main purpose would be for killing waves. So Jacob is someone that scales really nicely with Guild Boss. He is like your main Guild Boss hero. He's on the best Guild Boss teams. He's also extremely good in Guild versus Environment, so he would never be a waste to build. In regards to Tulpa, though, because Tulpa counterattacks once he is attacked 6 times, you do have to worry about him being counterattacked. If he is not built with enough sustain and Tulpa ends up doing high damage to him, he could get one shot. So that is something to keep in mind. As far as other heroes go, Aurak used to be the king of Tulpa, and he still is extremely good for someone who wants to just farm a lot of Tulpa, but he does end up dropping off towards the end. You can still use him, but you would have to sink resources into him, and I just don't think he would be worth it at maybe the Hell 4 stage, right? He can probably get you up to Hell Stage 2, even without books or anything of that nature. So he's still a really nice pick, especially for someone who's new or mid-game, where out of these specific heroes, maybe Aurak is the one that you have. So that is an option. Azrina is also quite good. She has a very unique special ability where her damage is increased by 20% of Ignite stacks. I mention this hero because there are specific heroes in the game, really at Legendary and even now at Epic with this hero, that put a lot of stacks of Ignite on bosses. So there may be a specific Ignite team out there for people that have all of the right heroes for that. On top of that, we do have heroes like Hassel, which is similar to Connor in the fact that he gives specific targets increased damage boost, so this will help you kill Tulpa quicker. He also brings an AoE defense down, so he's one of those requirements where he's bringing the defense down on Tulpa as well as his minions. So Hassel is a nice pick, and he also scales really well into the PvP meta, so he definitely would not be a waste to build to level 50 or 60. And then last but not least is Bruzak. Bruzak gives your team defense up, as well as protecting your heroes once they get below 50% health. Bruzak will end up taking the bulk of that damage. And on top of that, he has attack down on his basic, so it can decrease the damage of Tulpa. So, last but not least, we're going to talk about the legendaries. So, from a wood perspective, okay, there are a couple heroes here that still perform well in Tulpa, even though they are not going to be your first picks. Bulin is a very nice damage dealer. She can help with the waves, clear waves, and she can be a decent source of damage on Tulpa himself. Another one is Yolanda. Yolanda is a hero that gives your main damage dealers extra turns, as well as a shield for sustain to help keep your team alive. So, very, very solid hero there. Gangello is a hero that is really great up to the Hell Stage 2. He used to be the king of all dungeons until Hell Stage 4 came out, and they nerfed poison. But if you have Gangello, I'm sure you can search Hell Stage 2 teams with Gangello, and you'll find tons of content on it, and it still holds true to this day. Some of these other heroes here, Savannah and Rachel, also quite good. They can increase your damage dealers' damage output And Rachel also brings some sustain on her ultimate. So nice options there if you have them. Shane is kind of like the new Gangello. He scales extremely well into the late game, and he's basically on most of all of the speed teams for Hell Stage 4. I use him in all of my comps as well. So if you have Shane, I'm sure you can find tons of content that is really recent that allows you to beat dungeons quickly. So if you have Shane, you've basically won the game. Next is Mathasia. Mathasia brings you tons of healing potential, tons of protection, and then she also has an AoE revive, which is one of like 2 or 3 heroes in the entire game. So if you have Mathasia, the Tulpa dungeon can be very easy. She can be your main source of sustain, and you can bring a lot more damage because then she can just revive people back up. Jocasta is very similar to Mathasia. She brings a lot of sustainability, a lot of heals, a lot of defense, and on her basic ability, she actually does true damage to the target based on 8% of their max health, but 3% on bosses, so she helps on waves and the boss, dealing damage on her basic while keeping the rest of the team alive. Barclay is specific to certain bleed teams, and he may actually scale with Tulpa, but I do not have him to understand if that bleed team would work at Tulpa. I assume it would, but I don't know if it would be your best bet. And now we're getting into like your main source of beating Tulpa. If you have 1 or 2 of these heroes, specifically, Tulpa is going to be extremely easy. The newest hero, Alicia, is somebody that does really well, especially if you build her in damage. She has a trait that allows team members on your team to ignore 35% of the target's defense if they're in stealth, and her special ability grants stealth to your team every 3 rounds, but if it's booked every 2, and she herself can do a decent amount of damage if you build her that way. Geralt. He used to be the king of Tulpa as well because he got so many different attacks based on going into his Azura state, and if he was ascended, he would gain a bonus turn. On top of that, he has his own self-sustain, so if he were to be attacked by Tulpa or any of his minions, he would counterattack and gain health back up. So he's a damage dealer with self-sustain, as well as having defense pierce up 2 and attack up on his self. So he could be your main source of damage, really cutting into Tulpa's defense up static effect that he gives himself at the beginning of the dungeon run. Flarence is just like Shane. Flarence and Shane go together really well. If you have Flarence and Shane, you can bring in a myriad of different heroes to do damage, and you're going to kill Tulpa extremely quickly. She gives your whole team bonus attacks, and she heals them up, and she puts increased damage taken on the boss and waves as well. She has another big heal here that also transfers the defense down back onto the hero. Back onto the boss. And then she removes positive effects, which I don't believe any of the waves or boss or his minions have any of those, any buffs for you to remove. But either way, her ultimate and her special ability keep your team alive while also increasing their damage. She's one of the best heroes in the game, if not the best, to be honest. Bachelard, I think, was made for Tulpa when he first came out, but he's since morphed into, a guild versus environment specific hero. I say that because he has this trait where if he's attacked by a counterattack, he reduces the damage taken. So it's interesting that he has this trait. It's only useful, really, in Tulpa. And you have to time it or build your team specifically so he always takes the damage received from the counterattack, and it's just hard to do that. But even without that, he does put up ignites on Tulpa. He actually can be a pretty good damage dealer, and he also has the ability to give defense down to Tulpa to really limit his damage and allow you to kill him quicker. So Bachelard is a nice option. He's more of a support hero, though, than a main damage dealer. So Bella is actually like the main speedrun hero for Tulpa, along with some other fire damage dealers, but she has this specific trait that ignores 20% of the target's defense just baseline, and then it specifically says if the target has defense up effects. And as we've already pointed out, Tulpa has a static defense up effect, so we'll already have that. It then ignores 30% of their defense, and it applies increased damage taken 2 for 2 turns regardless of their resistance. So Tulpa will always have increased damage taken done on him if you have Bella in your team, and she will always ignore 50% of his defense. So, like I said, she was built for Tulpa, and I use her in my main speed team as well. And also on her ultimate, she gives herself defense pierce up, so she just is doing tons and tons of damage to Tulpa. So Cirrus used to be a nice option for Tulpa because she was a synthesis hero, but they replaced her with Bella. So if you have Cirrus, you can use her, but I highly recommend synthesizing for Bella. I think she's just a good hero in general, and she's going to make progressing in Tulpa easier. But Cirrus does have attack up, and she does have pierce up, defense pierce up on her basic. So she is a nice option for Tulpa. She also turns into an AoE damage dealer, so she can help you take down some of the waves. So Cirrus is still a good option. Zitlin actually has specific comps that allow you to kill Tulpa like in one turn once you get to him, because he has this curse ability where the amount of damage that Tulpa takes will be doubled as long as this curse was up. So if you have curse up and then you do a bunch of damage to him, after the 2 turns is up, it takes all of the damage that you did to Tulpa within those 2 turns and then duplicates it. So he'll take that damage again. But you need enough damage with your damage dealers to make the Zitlin comp work. It's mainly like a glass cannon type of strategy. So just be aware of that, but it is a nice option if you have Zitlin. Hector is another one that you can use, but I think there are better options. He does have this increased damage taken on his special, and he can do nice damage as well with just a bunch of bonus attacks. He gives himself damage up. He's also a nice option in Guild Boss and Guild vs. Environment, so he's an okay hero to invest in. Brand is one of the endgame heroes for a couple reasons. One, he gives people this really big shield, which not only keeps your team alive, but it also counts as a buff. And I mention this because I don't know if you guys noticed, but on Bella, on her ultimate, it says damage scales with the number of positive effects on her. So Brand's shield will count as a positive effect, increasing her damage. So it also applies to a couple other heroes in this video, such as Gavin, which we will get to. But back to Brand. Like I said, he has that big shield to help give you sustain. He then gives your entire team attack up 2 and defense up 2, so more survivability and increased damage. He also removes a negative effect on your team. So that means that Tulpa's AoE defense down can be removed by Brand. So very nice. And he's one of the main support heroes for endgame teams. Balberith, you do want to skip on. He's not going to be really important, and he doesn't do enough damage. He's more of a PvP character. Ralph is a hero that could be useful. He does have AoE taunts, so he can help you clear the waves If you don't have enough AoE damage dealers, he can come in there and taunt some of those heroes so they don't wipe your team before you get to Tulpa. If he is A5, meaning you're a huge whale, I doubt you're having any issues with Tulpa. Giranol is kind of a PvP hero, but she can be used in Tulpa because she has some nice AoE damage. She'll just need specific builds. But I do think that you're better suited using some kind of Bella team over Giranol and just using her for PvP. Darcy is useless, do not use her. Alicia is a PvP hero specifically, so you should not use her as well in Tulpa. Levi can be good. He does some pretty nice damage on his ultimate. He can also dodge some of the counterattacks. So he's more of an RNG hero. If you're looking for consistent runs and progression in Tulpa, Levi's probably not your guy, but he is an option if you did the Attack on Titan event. So Gavin is similar to Bella, where he ignores defense, and then he ignores even more based on each positive effect on him. So there is potential for him to do even more damage than Bella, but it would need to be a really specific comp and really specific timing. So I still think Bella is a better option than him, but Gavin may be a nice hero in upcoming dungeons that are being released here at the end of April. At least that's what's speculated. So stay tuned there. But Gavin is a nice option. He's just probably a little outclassed by Bella in Tulpa specifically. So Matson is also a nice hero for Tulpa for a couple of reasons. One, he has this unique ability called Vampiric Touch, where it's kind of like a lifesteal that we saw on Marion. So anytime that people are attacking the character that has this Vampiric Touch on them, they are healing up based on their damage. So that's kind of nice. And he also summons an ally with the lowest health to help them heal back up from that Vampiric Touch with this ultimate ability. So this is a kind of a cool hero to bring into Tulpa. He's not really in any of the endgame speed team comps, but if you pulled one of him, he might actually be a nice option with Bella to be your 2 damage dealers, while also bringing some sustain. He also brings additional ignite, and then he has the ability to even decrease Tulpa's defense. So a lot of good things coming out of Matson. Rosalie. If you were around to pull Rosalie on your seasonal banner, I mean, she just makes Tulpa extremely easy. She can actually even solo Tulpa if she's strong enough. She does counterattacks on fire heroes and then heals herself back up. She also gives herself invincible with her ultimate ability, and she ignores 50% of Tulpa's defense. So if you have Rosalie, she is going to be your main source of damage. You probably don't need to synthesize Bella. You can just run with Rosalie. So Rosalie is going to be your main damage dealer out of all of these fire units. She is going to be the easiest one to beat Tulpa, and she also performs really well in Ash Magisteria. So she's a very nice hero to use books on if you're looking for dungeon progression and you're PvE focused. Taliesin, if you're lucky enough to have him, is a very nice character. He helps extremely well with wave clearing on his ultimate. It doesn't look like it because it's single target, but it actually is a AoE effect because it deals splash damage to everyone around your main target. The only downside with Taliesin is the fact that he will not have a whole lot of effect on Tulpa himself, but from a wave clearing perspective, very, very good. And then Valeria is probably the best AoE damage dealer. I think it could be close with Giranol for sure. If Giranol's booked, I mean, she outclasses Valeria for sure. But if they're both unbooked, Valeria is definitely your main source of AoE damage dealing and probably your top pick to do wave clearing in Tulpa. So that's my video on Tulpa. I hope it helped you understand the mechanics a little bit, things that you should watch out for, and the heroes that you can specifically look to build if you're looking to progress in Tulpa. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave your comments below to see if this type of style of video helps you or not, because if you give me enough feedback on this one, I can switch things up on the upcoming dungeon series for places like Ash and Queen of Tides. Okay? All right. Thank you very much. Have a good one.